Is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon. I'm Deirdre Hopkins, your PPRA president. I'm here to introduce social media during a crisis, insights and best practices from the pros. I want to thank everybody who signed up for this, our fourth webinar in our series of Alone Together, Staying Together, Being Home, and Working Together. So I'm really proud of the efforts of Kelsey Turner, Chris Lukash, London Faust, Rebecca, Brie, Kyle. They're all bringing you quality programming, and I'm very appreciative of that. And I want to just get everybody started a little bit before I introduce our moderator by asking if you will please start your questions in the chat so that once we get to the question period, we'll have a substantial amount. We'll keep the program moving smoothly, and we'll try to get to everybody's questions about how we conquer social media during a crisis. So our moderator today is Brie Genovese. She's Director of Digital Strategy for Vault Communications. I think she is the perfect moderator for this panel because I'm reading her bio and I'm like, Temple Made, woo! And I know a lot of our members are Temple Made. And I thought it was very interesting that Vault discovered her through Twitter, and social media is the focus of what we're doing now. And they got her through a Twitter career chat. I thought that was really impressive. She left and went and did some agricultural things, some design things. She really understands startup in terms of like watching seedlings grow. So I thought she was fantastic. She came back to Vault, and she's done digital marketing and branding, and she's worked on products. She just seems to have what I consider a wide range of skills and expertise in our communications industry. So with that, I want to turn over this fantastic panel of people that we all work with and we all embrace. And I want to turn it over right now to our fantastic moderator, Brie Genovese, who will introduce the rest of the panel. And please remember to come back to our website. We're going to have a fantastic program. Kelsey's already working with me to have Jeff Borsino of Visit Philly come on and talk about managing through crisis. He'll be interviewed by Anya Lachelle of NBC 10. That'll be in early May. We're working on things with video editing. So definitely a robust slate of programming. We couldn't do it without, as I previously mentioned, Kelsey and Chris and the rest of our team. On behalf of our board of directors, I'm presenting the social media during a crisis panel. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Deirdre. That was such a nice introduction. I appreciate it. And I am so happy to be here moderating this panel. This is really exciting chance to sort of get to connect with people at a time when we're all kind of stuck inside and craving human communication. So it's nice to be able to do this for sure. I'm going to actually let our panelists introduce themselves, and we're really excited just to kind of dig into how everyone is navigating social media management just in light of COVID-19. I know it's just been such a whirlwind across the board from the perspective of managing strategies all the way through to figuring out sort of how to lead our own businesses through this. So we're really excited to dig in and talk about everything that we've learned just in the past few weeks of having to really pivot in relationship to everything that's happening with this pandemic. And we have a lot of great questions lined up. So we're touching on everything from strategy shifts to emerging platforms. Everybody's probably watching TikTok right now, and they probably weren't a few weeks ago. Talking about the rise in live streaming, and then just some emerging trends that we've seen from some of the analytics that we're looking at on the back end. So without further ado, I want to give our panelists a chance to introduce themselves. So let's start with Rebecca and then go to London and Kyle.
Great, thank you. And thank you to the team at PPRA for coordinating this. And thank you to folks that are listening in for taking time. You may have kids jumping on you and trying to make dinner and everything, so we appreciate your ears and audiences. I'm Rebecca Devine. I'm co-founder and principal of Maven Communications. We're an integrated communications agency in Philadelphia, focusing on crisis management, public relations, and digital and social media strategies. We work with clients in a variety of industries, but they tend to focus on B2B with some B2C with an emphasis on financial services, so working with banks, working with a lot of folks in real estate, which is particularly hard hit right now in terms of both residential and commercial. And then we also do a lot of large nonprofit and other professional services work. So thanks, everyone. Looking forward to it.
Hi, everyone. I'm London. I am the digital media manager at Bellevue Communications Group, which is a full-service PR firm in Center City. I am part of a smaller team at the agency that leads a lot of our social media and digital media efforts. And some of the clients that I work with on the social side that I'll be mentioning throughout the panel are Reading Terminal Market. I work with some of the merchants within the market. I work with a retirement community on the main line. I work with some nonprofits, political advocacy organizations. So it's really across the board. So I'm excited to dive into that with you guys.
Awesome. Hi, everybody. I'm Kyle. I'm the social media specialist for the Philadelphia Convention and Visitors Bureau, which is the official tourism promotion agency for the city of Philadelphia globally, as well as the primary sales and marketing agency for the Pennsylvania Convention Center. Myself, alongside a small but mighty team that's spread across the globe, work to oversee the strategy for our 12 owned social media accounts, which operate in 9 different markets and in 4 different languages, including accounts in China, Germany, France, and the Nordic region. And I also play a part in developing original photography and content for our website and blog. But happy to be here. Thank you for having me, PPRA, and I hope everybody enjoys the panel.
All right, great. Thank you, guys. We really appreciate that. All right, so let's dive into our first question. And I just wanted to reiterate what Deirdre said at the beginning. We're going to have about 45 minutes of the panelists answering the questions. And so you guys will be on mute at that time, but you can feel free to enter any questions that you have in the panel, in the GoToWebinar panel. And if you can enter those throughout the conversation, we can catch you when you're sort of thinking through this stuff as you hear what the panelists have to say. And then we'll be opening up the last 15 minutes of the broadcast to your questions, and we'll have the panelists answer them directly. Okay, so the first question really is just sort of an overall question about social strategy. So we're just wanting to know, how have you guys adjusted your social strategy in the wake of COVID-19? Has your posting frequency changed? Have you seen a shift in the way people are using platforms? And then what do you think of the explosion of some of these up and coming platforms like TikTok and House Party and stuff like that? So I don't know, Rebecca, if you want to start, and then we can kind of let everybody take that one.
Sure. Yeah. I mean, I think, you know, it's no secret and no surprise that with everyone being home, people are spending a lot more time on social media. I think eMarketer came out with a statistic that in March, there's a 70% increase in utilization on Facebook. So people are engaged. You have a captive audience of folks that are locked in. And what we've seen is that people are really looking for different types of content. So the straight up sort of salesy messaging stuff doesn't really play well. It just feels a little bit tone deaf and not on point with what's actually happening. So probably in early to mid-March, we started really shifting away from not just every once in a while, but sort of making a concentrated effort to look at our client social media platforms and assess what was going to be relevant and what wasn't. I mean, people are looking for different channels for different types of stuff. So we're, you know, when we're working with a bank client, they're not going to be posting a lot of stuff on TikTok, but TikTok content feels really good, you know, like, and people want to consume that. So for brands where that makes sense, you know, being a little experimental and playing is good. We've shifted some of the strategy to look at, to focus inward a little bit, sort of focus on employees, whether it's highlighting their work from home space or, you know, what they're doing with their kids in relation to work as well, to try to just bring a little bit of warmth back to these more corporate platforms, where maybe before they wouldn't have allowed any of that space. Now there is, and there's a big audience for it, because it's not just consumers that are looking at it now, it's the internal teams as well. So we're sort of broadening our scope a little bit in terms of reach that way.
Absolutely. I don't, whoever else wants to take the question too, if you can feel free.
London, go for it if you want to.
I was just gonna, I totally agree. I think that in addition to more users being online and searching for information on social media, more businesses than ever have decided to start Facebook pages and Instagrams to try and get their message out there. So I don't know about everybody else, but for me, it just, like, the algorithms were all kind of out of whack at first. I feel like as more and more accounts were out there, so I feel like we just had to try so much harder to stay relevant and get our message across. And I had to have some really tough conversations with my clients that were saying, all right, we got to pause. We can't be posting on social at all. And I was like, honestly, that might be the worst thing that you could do right now, because you're not going to be able to come back from that after this. So, you know, really having those conversations about, we need to maintain or increase frequency, and we just need to shift the kind of content, like you said, Rebecca, to not be tone deaf, but to stay relevant, so that, you know, we kind of can continue to break through the noise in the way that we've been trying to this whole time. So, you know, it's been interesting to kind of have to educate clients about that part of it.
Yeah, that's such a good point, London. I feel like it's been so difficult to sort of find that balance of shifting the conversation, shifting your posts, especially when you're working months ahead on content, right? It's like everybody's, with planning and approvals and everything, all of a sudden having to pivot and create new content and hold content that you've invested resources into creating. I think that's what created such a panic almost for the 2 weeks after the quarantine started. It was like, hold on, what are we doing? So that's a great point.
Right.
Yeah, for us, we were in a unique scenario in that having social media accounts in China, we were actually dealing with COVID-19 for a while, really. It was really the entirety of February and then into March that we had actually paused social posting in China due to that initial outbreak, just looking at what other destinations were doing, how the market was reacting. And then obviously it started to spread here in the US and elsewhere in the world. And we kind of reviewed our account strategy on a case-by-case basis, market by market. Some of them paused temporarily for about a week, maybe a few days. Here in the US, we remain pretty active on Twitter, Facebook, Instagram. To London's point, once you do stop, it is hard to kind of come back online. And you know, to really the crux of this kind of question is that there's a lot of people online. There's a lot of people who are there to receive your message now. So, you know, by adjusting the way that you're presenting information, it could actually be beneficial for you to, you know, really gain some loyal following and some people interested in the messages that you're putting out. And I know we're going to touch on tone in a little bit. But another thing we noticed too is that for Instagram in specific, we noticed a 33% jump the week of Philadelphia's stay-at-home order went into effect as far as our engagements are concerned. So for us, it was very clear early on as things really progressed that people were online, people were paying attention to the information we were putting out, and we kind of had to look at, okay, what is that information that we're putting out? And I know we'll touch on that in a little bit more in a second.
Yeah, that's a great segue, Kyle. Thank you. So yeah, we really definitely wanted to get into the fact that everybody's talking about not sounding tone deaf, right? It's like the #1 thing that I think everybody was scared of when this all started. How do we compare, you know, the content that we have coming down the pipeline and figure out whether or not it's appropriate? So what has your process been for determining what content you wanted to move forward with posting, and how have you tweaked your messaging to make sure it feels appropriate for the current landscape?
Here, go ahead, Kyle.
Oh, sorry. For us, so, you know, obviously our goal throughout this whole crisis to really keep Philadelphia top of mind while also finding ways to support the local community, especially hospitality workers and those impacted by COVID-19. So, you know, our messaging has quickly adjusted from, you know, obviously promoting all there was to see and do in the city to really promoting virtual experiences and how you can access the city online via virtual tours, downloading Zoom backgrounds, Philadelphia Spotify playlists, finding ways to engage our audience and still promote the destination in a way, but do it with keeping in mind what's going on, and obviously interspersing language and messages and incentives and initiatives that help promote and support the local hospitality community, restaurants, hospitality workers, hotel workers that are furloughed or laid off, and finding, sensitive ways to kind of approach that messaging.
Yeah, I think, as this started to evolve, and both London and Kyle talked about, okay, when this first broke, some clients wanted to take a pause, some clients didn't want to say anything, some people were somewhere in the middle. But what has helped us adjust our strategy is just going back to basics, like who are our target audiences, what types of information are they interested in, and how can we provide that in a meaningful way, in a way that sounds authentic and genuine. So depending on who the clients are, we've adjusted that to focus maybe less on, me, the company itself, and more on the community. So to Kyle's point, like if it's a residential real estate developer, the construction order for residential real estate has stopped unless it's affordable housing. So they can't be, and it feels a little tone deaf to be promoting just beautiful luxury virtual tours. So maybe we switch that content and focus more on how are you supporting the local restaurants that were in the first floor of the building? How are you supporting the area around it? Are you helping to donate gift cards and that sort of thing? So we've just shifted it slightly to give content that is meaningful to the audiences at large. And I think the basic question we're asking, is it self-serving or is it serving a little bit more of the greater we? And that's the type of content that we're seeing that is doing really well right now, because people are looking for good news, they're looking for resources, they're looking for information that they can use now. They're not necessarily clicking and buying that pair of jeans like they were a couple weeks ago. So
I definitely agree. And I think that something that I've been trying to do is just be overly transparent with our audiences. And I think it's a little funny because I feel like as social media professionals, we understand how it works. We understand that there are teams that are doing this. It's not just some random entity that's pumping out content all the time. But the general public, I feel like, is finally realizing that there's humans behind the keyboard, and we're the ones that are taking their questions, that are producing this content. And, I found it helpful to just be really transparent and say, we're all trying the best that we can, and let me as the brand know what you want to see, what questions do you have. So just, keeping in touch with the audience and seeing what they need and just being very transparent in our communications has been really helpful.
Yeah, that's a good point.
We did something similar to London's point, in that early on Instagram, we posted a rather long message, and part of that message was kind of just asking folks to comment and give us recommendations on what they want to see, what brings them calm, what brings them a sense of comfort during this time. And we did our best to kind of fulfill those kind of requests in the comments. And it was just a way to engage our audience that was thoughtful, and really kind of helped hopefully pull some people through a tough time early on.
Absolutely. It seems like if you approach content from a place of goodwill right now, you really can't lose. And as long as you're keeping that top of mind and sort of keeping the audience top of mind, it's great advice. And speaking of audiences, one of the things that we wanted to talk to you guys about was just how audiences really are consuming social media in such a different way now. How have your interactions with your audiences on your pages shifted compared to the pre-coronavirus world? Also, just have you started to identify any new usage trends and looking at analytics, and how will this impact your reporting when you're looking at month over month and year over year metrics?
I mean, I think that the trends that I'm seeing aren't anything really out of the ordinary. I mean, as we said, there are so many more people using social media right now, for better or for worse. It's definitely getting my clients, more engagement just because people have the time, whether it's nice things or not nice things. But I think it's, creating some opportunities for brand loyalty and just goodwill amongst your audiences. But I mean, like Kyle said, we have seen, at least for Reading Terminal, way more Instagram growth than any other platform, which I think is interesting. And, we have the unique position of being really looked at as a tourist trap. And, that is a challenge in that we want to be looked at as a grocery option. And right now, we are solely a grocery option. So it's really changed the audiences that we have access to, and I'm really excited to be able to talk to them and interact with them after all this is over and they're still sticking around. So I think, you know, the new audiences that are finding us are a trend that I'm excited to capitalize on after I'm done answering all of the angry people about their grocery orders.
Yeah. I guess in response to this sort of like impact on reporting, you know, it's very clear that, you know, if we're looking at month over month, you know, March is a huge anomaly in terms of what happened before. And if we're doing year over year reporting, that's just, you know, there's a little bit of you have to address the fact that there's a global event that is totally shifting the way you look at things. But, and our clients have been very, so far on board with it, but I think we're just reevaluating what the success looks like. So before it might have been like ROI is king, you know, if it doesn't lead to sales or if it doesn't lead to this, then it's not working. Whereas now we're looking at it as in, let's look at engagement. You know, are people engaging with our content? Are they clicking on it? Are they consuming it? Because we're not necessarily hard selling anything right now. So the fact that we're keeping our customers engaged and keeping them in the loop, and sort of to London's point, like building that brand loyalty, you know, when they are going to rejoin the real world again, they're going to be more likely, hopefully, to partner with us than someone else who may have gone silent or didn't respond in a way that was meaningful during this time. So we're definitely just evaluating a little bit more of what success looks like, and it's definitely different than it was maybe 2 months ago.
Yeah, very, very similar to what Rebecca was saying. There's pretty much a large asterisk on our reporting for March 2020 and I assume April 2020, right? So, you know, our goal remains the same, and it's increasing awareness about Philadelphia. So we still are looking at impressions and engagements, obviously understanding that, you know, due to not running some paid campaigns, et cetera, that they're not going to be as high as they would have been otherwise. But, you know, as we noted, we are seeing an increase in engagements organically, which is a promising sign. And that's something that I hope will continue on after everything kind of sets back to normal, and we can kind of capitalize on that a little bit.
Absolutely. So I wanted to touch about the ways that some technology has changed the ways that we're connecting with our audiences and with customers and consumers and things like that. And there's no denying that live streaming has really skyrocketed in popularity as a result of this. Have you guys leveraged this technology at all to connect with your audiences? And if so, what tools have you found to be most effective and why? And then I'd also love to hear any tips that you guys have for preparing for a live stream or having a successful broadcast.
For us, really quickly, we haven't deployed any live services as a result of COVID yet. We're looking at a few options. I know a few of our partners and other organizations throughout the city have activated on it and activated on it quite well. We have done live in the past, and as far as tips go, you know, really for me, it helps to really script things out, script it out like a TV show, like a movie. Do a couple run-throughs before you go live, especially if you're not comfortable. You know, if you're going to be on the camera, if you're not comfortable being on the camera, definitely, you know, work out some bugs and some kinks, and you know, gain that confidence there. But I think kind of having a run-through, having a plan of, you know, what camera angles do you want? What are the talking points that you want to hit on? What do you want to show the audience? That all really helps kind of solidify your live stream.
Yeah, we also have not utilized a lot of live streaming, but primarily because most of our clients weren't doing it before. They weren't super comfortable just jumping into it now. But what it has done is opened up a little bit. It's definitely opened up their eyes to the power of just video and recording content and publishing that with more frequency. I think before, in some clients, we were like, really trying to push video, and they were like, no, it's too much money, it's too much this, it's so much production. But now everyone's sort of used to seeing us as we are now, right? Camera and a backdrop and sort of recording little snippets, tidbits, tips, etc. And as that access sort of grew, now folks are much more comfortable sharing that information and not having it be quite so formal, and the response is really good. So, you know, our tips are basically more like media training 101 tips with, you know, your at-home office as the backdrop. So we're still telling people, you know, have a quiet space. Try not to be backlit, so you're all in the shadow. AirPods work better than some computer audio in some cases. And try not to have your kids, you know, running and jumping on your head. But for the most part, it's really, it's made people a lot more amenable to it, which has been great.
Similarly, we aren't doing a lot of live streaming just for capacity issues, but something that I have tried to do is, I feel like what people really like about live is the behind the scenes real feel of it. And so I've been trying to capture that in videos I am able to record and produce on my own, you know, specifically like with Reading Terminal, for example, going and getting, here's how you would shop right now, or here is how the delivery system is working, here's what's going on in the market, so that people can still see kind of what's going on in that similar live behind the scenes way. And then we're also trying to get our clients to do webinars like this. You know, like Rebecca said, this is the new normal. And so if they're not comfortable doing live videos where they're doing Q&A or they're doing an activity, you know, partnering our clients together, or, you know, getting organizations to do webinars where they can be live like this, or even pre-recorded videos, just, you know, anything to get them out there creatively.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we have a client that is an association, and they actually have focused on building out some, they have already done some kid-focused content, so, you know, stuff to keep kids entertained and crafts and things like that. And it's been fun to see them leverage live, just going live, you know, once a week at 2 p.m. to be able to do a critter craft or something like that. And it is a really neat way to connect. And I think your point, Rebecca, about people sort of having their eyes open to some of the possibilities, I think it's pushed people to realize, like, hey, maybe this isn't as scary as we thought it was, because we have a lot of clients too that are just like, no way, we are not going to go live. That's not even in our wheelhouse. And now I think they're probably more warmed up to it than they used to be, because everybody's kind of had to get used to being on these video calls, which has been interesting. But London, so I know that you have had sort of a particularly interesting experience on the customer service side and some of the stuff that you have done. And so I was just wondering if you wanted to weigh in a little bit on what that has looked like as far as, you know, communicating new policies, especially as how the market operates has changed so much, how you're leveraging social media for customer service, and what has been the most effective for that.
Sure. So, I mean, it's definitely, you know, I feel like people are not even visiting my clients' websites or calling them or emailing them. They're just directly going to social media. And I have to constantly remind myself that they're not directing their anger purely at me personally. You know, and I try really hard to help as much as I can. And it's really across all platforms. Like I would say Instagram is probably the one where people feel the most comfortable just coming in and throwing in a comment or DMing. Which is interesting, but it definitely happens on Facebook and Twitter as well. But my process has really just been to, if I can address the issue publicly, I will. I'm happy to answer any questions or help however I can. If I need them to DM, then I will. But there are some situations where I just kind of have to flip it to internal, my clients to deal with. But I mean, I think that it's really valuable to have that opportunity to, because I think 9 times out of 10 people just want to be heard, and as soon as I answer them they calm down, or, you know, there's actually a lot of people also just saying really nice things in the comments and they kind of talk to each other. But I feel like rules have also totally gone out the window. Like some of my most successful Facebook posts have just been pictures of a statement that we're making, and that would never have done well before. But it's just really interesting to see what does well and what doesn't, because I'll post like a nice pretty food picture, but that's not really what people want. They just want information. So it's been interesting.
Yeah, it's absolutely been interesting to watch the shift and how everybody is sort of engaging and interacting and what information they're looking for now, for sure. Okay, so let's talk a little bit about paid social, because that has been such a big focus really in the past year, especially with algorithms changing and sort of such a decrease in organic engagement. How has your paid social strategy changed as a result of COVID? Are you still boosting organic content, and have you opted to turn off your ads on social platforms and other boosting strategies?
For us, we've paused all paid social for the time being, across all accounts. It's mainly, obviously our goal is to promote travel to Philadelphia, both for meetings and for leisure from overseas. So neither one of those is in the realm of possibility at this point, right? So we understand that, and we want to make sure that when we do come back online live with paid efforts, it's done so in a sensitive way, and that's going to be part of our recovery campaign that we roll out, just to make sure that when we do deploy that paid strategy, it is sending the right message at the right time per market. So not everything will come back online at once. There will be different levels of that strategy, but as for now, we have opted to pause everything. Yes.
We right now we're also paused across the board, but like everyone else, we've boosted the frequency of the organic content. We are exploring with certain clients, and we'll probably launch a few paid campaigns, but it's in and around information that's relevant to them, in terms of if it's a law firm that has resources or information that we need more people to see because it would be helpful. Then that's the type of paid that we're exploring, but the traditional stuff is all paused right now.
Yeah, we were doing some in the beginning just to get important information out as far and wide as possible. But honestly, I just feel like things change too quickly to make ads worthwhile right now, because by the time they get through the approval process and start reaching people, it's totally irrelevant. But I think that, you know, there's definitely value in doing ads still if you have the product or the service that it will work with. Like, I am only basically getting served ads for grocery options and activities that you can do inside, things you can order, puzzles and things like that. So I don't think that there's harm in it if it's relevant. And I think that, you know, as things start to slow down, it's definitely going to come back a little bit more, you know, like Rebecca said, just information that people can actually use and not going right back to what we were doing before.
Yeah, getting out that educational content that is really important to get in front of people right now. Makes total sense. So flipping a little bit, we wanted to talk about the impact of social media on media relations right now, and how we know that newsrooms are inundated now more than ever. No, you know, none of the media wants to talk about anything unless it's COVID related, which makes total sense. But have you guys been able to use social media at all from a media relations perspective to help sort of break through the noise in the lack of being able to pitch? You know, have you been able to leverage social to get some of those key messages out? And how has your use of social media in support of media relations changed in the face of this crisis?
This is something I'm particularly passionate about, that social media is a form of media relations. And I don't think everybody looks at it that way, but I'm constantly finding reporters looking for things on Twitter and pitching them directly because of that. I, like this week, tweeted something for Reading Terminal about an update to grocery delivery that I wasn't planning on pitching, and it got picked up all over the place. And it's just, I think that reporters are seeing things on social media before they even have time to have it assigned by their editors. So I just think that, you know, traditional pitching is still the way to go, but if you can supplement that with social media posts, I just truly think that social media is the vessel for a media relations plan and a communications plan.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, we would wholeheartedly agree with that. And I think given the pace of and the changing information, and reporters, I mean, they've also got to think of dozens of different angles all related around the same central topic, right? So editors all want to see COVID-19, but if you're a real estate reporter, you know, you've got to think of 35 different angles around COVID-19 on this one industry topic. So we've actually started to see reporters, to Lemon's point, reaching out more, but also leveraging a lot of the resources that we're posting on social. Whereas they wanted everything to be packaged beautifully and perfectly before. But now, like, we did an interview yesterday with Dawn Heathner at 6ABC and sent her a video that was on the Instagram feed, and she's like, great, we'll use it for the broadcast, you know. So that would not have happened a month and a half ago. It would have had to be a little bit more polished. So we're definitely seeing just the speed and the access that social media provides is amplifying our social efforts across the board.
On our end,
media relations efforts. Yeah.
On our end, we've seen that some of the content that we created to really help fuel our social channels, our Philadelphia from Home blog post, for example, is kind of fitting that void of, you know, okay, everybody wants to talk about COVID-19, but what are some original things that we can highlight about it? And that being one of them has been picked up, as has our Zoom backgrounds. But another thing too is advocacy. So advocacy is really important for our industry, for hospitality workers. And that's something that we've used social to kind of help put our message out there. And at the same time, we use social to help amplify any media placements that we do get. MSNBC did an interview with our president and CEO a few weekends ago. We made sure to share some behind the scenes photos before the interview aired, and then made sure to amplify it appropriately on social media after it did air. Obviously knowing that that's going to reach a national audience, but we wanted to make sure that our stakeholders and the folks here locally saw that message and were aware of our stance and our fight to really support our hospitality community. So that's kind of how we've engaged via social.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, it's definitely a powerful tool. There's no denying that. And Rebecca kind of touched on my next question a little bit earlier, but we wanted to dig into what stakeholders are really expecting from their social programs right now. So what does success look like given this change? And then also just how your KPIs have changed.
I mean, I think for me, I work with a lot of nonprofits, and so the stakeholders include board members. And so there has been a lot of education taking place in terms of proving that I'm doing my job properly, because a lot of people are like, well, it's not showing up in my feed, so where is it? And, you know, I think that for all of my clients, it's really just the number one thing they're looking for is engagement from users and then interaction from us. So as long as we are on top of things and interacting and responding, I think that, you know, that is deemed a success. And, you know, being able to kind of circle back and say, okay, well, I know you're not seeing it, but here's all the results. And I mean, to touch back on reporting, I'm doing reporting way more frequently now than I was before, just because there's more to report on. So just kind of closing the loop with that.
Yeah, and I
go ahead, Rebecca.
Go ahead. I was gonna say just some of our don't require the frequency of reporting that like Reading Terminal Market might, for example. They don't really know what to make of it yet in terms of what success looks like. So, you know, it's up to us to sort of educate them in terms of, you know, they're not going to be exactly the same KPIs that we had a few months ago. And here's why. And here's why this engagement and the frequency is so important in terms of telling the right message. But it has started to open up a little bit more willingness for experimentation. So we're trying to encourage some of the clients to like play a little bit, not with messages that are off topic or not relevant, but like, you know, you never wanted to do video, but let's try it. You know, we'll do something that's low production but meaningful, and maybe it showcases your employees or their work in the community, or, you know, they're working from home, and that's what's resonating, and it's sort of opened up different avenues of experimentation where we never would have gotten something like that approved, you know, pre-pandemic. So hopefully out of this, there'll be more willingness to showcase different sides of a brand and tell a more human story.
Yeah, and a similar note, you know, I think for us, it's, again, making sure that we're doing everything in our power to keep Philadelphia top of mind, and making sure that our stakeholders and members and partners and colleagues throughout the city are aware of the work that we're doing. So that's where, you know, as I just mentioned, sharing that information via social media, via the news hit, or updates or a long advocacy thread on Twitter, I think that really kind of helps send that message across. I think everybody realizes that KPIs are going to be different. They're going to be it's going to be dramatically impacted because of what's going on. Everybody's in the same boat. Everybody's KPIs are impacted by this. So I think it's just about, again, explaining, what we did, how it performed, and again, hopefully show that, out of all of this are organic impressions and organic engagement and organic audience growth all somehow benefited in a way. So I think that's kind of where our stance is now.
Yeah, it's such a great point. It's like reframing sort of what's important right now and why, and helping the client understand why, you need to make that shift and how you're still adding value given the fact that we can't tie social back to sales right now, because that's really not appropriate. So completely agree with you guys on the advice that you had there. And we really just have one more question that we wanted to touch on before we open everything up for Q&A. And we just kind of want your opinion. So obviously nobody can say what the future holds regarding coronavirus. I know I wish I knew what was going to happen, and that's one of the hardest parts about this quarantine. But what indicators are you guys going to be watching to determine how your approach to social will evolve in the coming weeks and months? When will you sort of start to evolve your messaging maybe back towards a little bit more stronger of a call to action, driving more traffic and things like that? What is that going to look like for you, if you have any just initial thoughts now?
For me, again, in short, everything's going to be different. I hate to be dramatic, but I think all indications are things are going to be different, at least for a very long time. And for us, it's finding ways to still promote the city, but doing it in a way that makes sense in a post-COVID-19 kind of world, right? So the way that we promote large events and gatherings and festivals is, I'm sure, going to be different. I'm sure there's going to be a larger focus on outdoor activities and things that you can do that are not where you're not surrounded by hundreds of people at one time. But at the same time, we also have to focus on promoting Philadelphia for what it is, and that's being a top destination in the world, and finding creative ways to do that. Again, back to my China example earlier, we've kind of been through this. We're like a month ahead of the curve in a way there, in that we've kind of resumed posting normally now that China's reopened. So we've kind of been through that process of pausing, easing back into the market, and now kind of getting back to our somewhat normal approach to social media. But again, it's all sharing content that is very sensitive to what has just happened or is happening, and keeping in mind how, for us, the traveler and the meeting planner is really thinking of things. How are hotels and venues and attractions keeping themselves clean? How are they maintaining social distance even after all of this is over? So that's all still kind of under development, but we're kind of keeping an eye on it market by market, and then deploying messaging accordingly.
Yeah, I totally agree with Kyle. It's if you think about, it feels like it's been forever because being quarantined is isolating, but it's really only, for Americans anyway, it's really only been about 5 weeks. So just even the shift in those 5 weeks in terms of the messaging and communications and what people want to hear. So 4 weeks ago, most of our posts started with, during these uncertain times, and as we deal with uncertainty, and during this hardship. And now people don't want to hear that anymore. They're like, yeah, it's hard for everyone. We're locked in. We get it. So now we're just being more direct with the content sharing, but it's constantly evolving, so we're trying to keep an eye on it. I think the one thing it's underscored for us is the huge importance of brand loyalty and establishing that with this more human connection. As the lockdown and quarantine started happening, people turned to brands they were familiar with, Tide, Kleenex, whatever they may be, not necessarily the super cute, beautifully packaged boutique brands, right? They sort of go with what they know. And the same can be said for every business. If you treat your customers and consumers with care and have messaging that supports them and supports the community, hopefully as we come out of this, they'll remember that and remain loyal to you because of what you did when things were hard. So that's sort of where our head is at in terms of framing the message for everyone. And, you know, we'll see as we build out of it how that evolves.
Yeah, and I'm interested in seeing, you know, if a lot of these brands and businesses that have taken to social media stay on social media and kind of increase the competitive landscape. And then, you know, now that everyone is kind of over engaging, is that going to continue after everything kind of calms down? Like, are they expecting over communication from brands at all times now, or are they just gonna be okay if everyone just kind of settles back into the normal? So I feel like taking cues from, at least my plan is to take cues from bigger brands, from brands that I follow, from experts that I follow. I feel like the social platforms themselves have done a pretty good job of relaying information. Like I feel like I get an email every day from Facebook about here's what's changing with our ads and things like that. So, you know, outlets like that checking in just on like industry standards and stuff, but it's gonna be weird.
I was just a quick anecdote. I was on another webinar earlier, I guess it was 2 weeks ago, and they were discussing TikTok, back to our earlier discussion around TikTok. And one of the speakers alluded to TikTok not being cool anymore because so many adults have adopted it during the quarantine. So it's going to be really curious to see how the social media platforms themselves kind of evolve off of this, right? There's so much more exposure to platforms like TikTok now. Is that going to be that kind of, you know, trendy young thing that everybody wants to go after, or is it going to be something else because it's no longer cool? So it'll be very interesting to see what happens.
It's been so funny to see people doing TikToks. It's like, you know, they're bored. And I personally really like the millennials on TikTok, you know, one that's been going around. So I'm like, yeah, pretty much we all poo-pooed it, and now we're all like, wait, what is this TikTok?
Yeah.
So it's such a good point. But to kind of to London's point about sort of the pace of how much brands are posting, that's a great segue into our first audience question, which is how much is too much COVID content to share, and at what point can our posts seem duplicative?
I mean, I think that it depends on who you are and what your brand is. I mean, I do think, you know, like Rebecca said, everyone gets it. We're all distressed and uncomfortable, and I do think that it's going to get tiresome. But if it's helpful information, I don't really think that there's a limit to too much. I think you might just want to try to spin it in a way that's not panicking people, because that's how I feel. Like, I'm avoiding watching the news, which is terrible for my profession, but just because it makes me sad. So if I'm seeing a lot of COVID content that's bumming me out, I'm going to avoid it. But if it's helpful to me, I'll definitely seek it out, no matter how much it is.
I'd add aspirational to that too. If any of the content is aspirational or inspirational, you know, something to really help pull people through a tough time, I think that is another kind of example of content that is good to share. But you know, just keep an eye on it. Again, pay attention to tone and what the overall social media landscape is doing, and adjust accordingly.
That's such a good point. I feel like it's been interesting, especially regarding influencer marketing, to see the shift from really like aspirational content to just inspirational. Like, we're all in this together. Everybody's on the same page. And I don't really care about your like really cool fashion posts anymore. It's been interesting to see how that has evolved. So the second question here, how are you developing valuable and authentic visual content for Instagram with this stay-at-home environment without having to constantly default to stock images or older photos?
For us, our Instagram strategy is largely driven by user-generated content. Apart from any photos that I go out and take myself, we do source from the local photographers in the city that contribute to our Discover PHL hashtag. So that's kind of been our focus for a long time, and you know, we just kind of continue on that path now. So I'm not sure if anybody else has any.
Yeah, we've been doing for some clients the sort of very organic, you know, selfie picture or like them at work or whatever is fine. We have a client that's focused exclusively on like American history. So we've been using a lot more, because there used to be events and other things that were happening, those are no longer. So we're really leaning on some open source photography and video, and then overlaying it with our branding to create original imagery that looks beautiful and feels good, but we're not necessarily going out and producing fresh photography.
I haven't done this personally, but I've seen a lot of brands that, I mean, I guess I have. Like creating, it's a big thing on Instagram stories right now, the fill in the blank, the brackets, the bingo. I've seen the flyers have done coloring pages that they've created out of photos that already exist. So I think that there are really fun, creative ways that you can use things you already have to make new things, or, even if you don't have Photoshop skills, Canva is a really great tool to create these really easy Instagram templates that you can use to just kind of fill in one day, at least, until you can find something new to post.
Yeah, it's a really great point, London. And I feel like graphics have been a good way to, like, to your point about sort of being able to even have a pull quote that performs better now than it does, it did before. And that's definitely something we're leaning into. And we had one of our photographers do an at-home food styling shoot, which we never thought would happen, but we're like shipping her bread, like, here you go and see what you can do. So we're definitely getting creative when it comes to developing social content. All right, so another question here. How do you navigate clients who don't listen to your professional advice on social media and what to do right now? It's a great question.
It is. It happens all the time. I feel like you have to provide examples and just numbers that show that you're right, and really outline the detriments of not following your advice.
Yeah, that's the great thing about social, is the feedback and reaction is fairly instantaneous. So, we had a client that was just posting. It was good content, but the frequency was way too much, and it was all very similar. And they're like, no, this is what we need to put out there. But like, let's say the first one did well, and then the next 10 did badly because it felt very repetitive. But you can literally show that, be like, no, this isn't a great idea. This is not the best strategy. We want to be doing X, and here's why. And you can literally see that this is not effective. And particularly if it's something that feels tone deaf, London would probably know best. Like, people get angry, and they do not. They will let you know that they do not appreciate the content that you're putting out. So hopefully that helps underscore their point.
Absolutely. Okay, another question here. Can you share best practices for sticking to your niche when sharing important COVID resources? Would it be helpful to share resources outside of your traditional scope? For example, if public health funders share info on stimulus checks.
So I don't know if this directly answers the question or not, but early on, especially overseas in China, we kind of faced this issue where we wanted to post a message of support, but there was a debate as to whether or not we needed to provide health and safety kind of information and all of these other resources. And I think for us, it ultimately came down to making sure that we, I guess, stayed in our lane, for lack of a better term. There are organizations out there that have social accounts that are putting out information related to them. You don't necessarily need to take on everything that is maybe not relevant to your business. Obviously we do have content that supports some health and safety information and, worker relief funds and stuff like that now. But I think it's just very important that, to still kind of stay on brand in a way, because that content is out there, it's being put out there by other people. So you don't have to really feel like you have to take it on. If you feel like it helps your audience and it is beneficial to your stakeholders or your members or your partners, then sure, put it out. But I would kind of vet that information first.
Yeah, like we sort of think of it as similar to like traditional public relations. You're a spokesperson for your brand in the fact that you are a trusted authority. And so when you're an authority on the things that you talk about, not only does it play better, but people trust that information is accurate and reliable. If you start going too far away from the things that it's less reliable, and I think you open yourself up to a lot of criticism. because you may be sharing something that inadvertently is not necessarily either accurate or reliable. So I think to protect your brand, staying within your lanes is important.
Yeah, I completely agree with that, Rebecca. Okay, so we have a couple more questions here, so we'll see what we can get to. But next question is, do you recommend keeping scheduled posts on future editorial calendars, or should we change everything to be explicitly relevant to the current times?
For me, it started. So when all of this started, I was like, oh well, by the end of April, we'll be fine. So some of that content stayed. But what I found myself doing now is, the content calendar's more or less been kind of cleared in a way, and it's really just kind of focused on the messaging that we're at now. Because again, back to my earlier point, I feel like the messages that we had or the editorial plans that we had likely won't apply once everything kind of quote unquote goes back to normal. So we'll have to even reevaluate those. So I mean, I would take a look at what content you have, see if it can maybe be adapted or changed into something that speaks more to the current times. But like I said, for me, I've had to kind of go in and scrap everything that we had kind of planned.
Yeah, I've tried to schedule, and then things just change too much. I end up unscheduling everything anyway. But I mean, I would say you could, depending on what it is, you could save it for hopefully like August when life is back to normal. So you wouldn't. It probably feels very frustrating to have scheduled a month of content and then just have to delete it all. But hopefully you can save some of it for a later date, or tweak it accordingly.
Yeah, we've had to push the same thing, and for one of our clients where it's literally an organization dedicated to American history. History, luckily, is still history. So a lot of the posts were more like on this day and in 1776, but we've sort of cleaned the slate and now focused on content that is inspiring stories throughout history of Americans overcoming challenges and like pushing upward. So it's like the same brand theme, but we've tweaked it to be more appropriate for the time. And that'll probably just continue to happen as we move forward.
All right, well, guys, we are right up on time here. It's almost 5:30. Thank you guys so much for all of your great insights today. This was awesome, and we really appreciate you taking the time to share everything that you have learned going through this process and just your experiences over the past couple of weeks. It's been extremely helpful. Again, I think that this recording is going to go out to everybody so that you can reference it if you need to. But thank you so much, everybody. We really appreciate it.
Thank you, everyone.
Thanks,
Stay
everyone.
safe.
Thanks for coming.
Take care.